My parents they came to Florida. My father was a dentist and orthodontist in New Jersey. My mother was a teacher. And actually the year that I was born, my father retired. I think he threw up his hands and he said, "One more daughter?" So he said, I'm done. So he chose Florida, he chose the East Coast. He said, because everybody comes to Florida when they retire, so I'm going to retire early. He bought some land on Hutchinson Island and he bought some land on Jupiter Island. We lived in Sewell's Point for, I think, about 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure. My oldest sister, Nancy, I think, started school there. But we moved to the island, probably to Jupiter Island, about 1947, I'm guessing. My father gave my mother the choice of either landing on Hutchinson Island or Jupiter Island. Hutchinson Island had no roads, no electricity, and no water. And Jupiter Island by that time was pretty well developed with all of those amenities. So they chose Jupiter Island. My father thinking that anytime you're near water, it's going to be valuable and it will increase in value. So that's how we ended up on Jupiter Island. And probably my most significant memory as a child was when I was years old. I was really 4 years old. We had the 1949 hurricane. I think others have talked about that. I remember a little bit about it. I remember we went to a store called Algazzini's on US 1. I don't remember why we went. Maybe we were getting juice or something, I don't know. And then we spent about 3 or 4 days in the Civic Center, which is where most of Hobe Sound stayed during that hurricane. That hurricane was called the Big One. There are a lot of the hurricanes called the Big One because they didn't name them then, obviously. But it blew the gauges off the Jupiter lighthouse at about 165, 170 miles an hour. So it was kind of huge. It blew the roof off our house, and we had a little house. I think that it was a Sears house. I think it came in a box, and I think that's how it was built. And we found the roof years later leaning against a tree in the woods behind our house. The next year, probably 50, Daddy said, "I'm not going through anything like that again." And he solidified this little house with all cement block. It made it out of cement block. The interior walls were cement block. The outside was cement block. And so we've gone through a bunch of hurricanes, and the house stood after that. But I do remember, Mother cooking on an open stove in the front of the house. I have a picture of her actually. That's how she cooked. And Jupiter Island was a little more rustic then than it is now. I don't know how they would take to having people cooking their meals in their front yards. But so that was in 1949. We had Wednesday afternoon potlucks that really got most of the town out, I believe, I would say. I don't know if the sandflies ate us more or we ate more of the food, but I can remember there were lots and lots of, they call them no-see-ums now, but we called them sandflies, and there were a lot of them. We had little Christmas celebrations. They used to have, I think Mrs. Thayer and Mrs. Mahan used to get involved in giving out Christmas presents, and so there was a real feeling of camaraderie in the community. And again, I think it was based on probably the school. The Presbyterian Church was up and running probably a little more sporadically during this time. So there were church events during that time. We went to the little Sunday school. Those kinds of places and activities were the centers probably of what we did. I've heard some stories about what some of the boys and some of the girls did in Hobe Sound, but we didn't really get involved in a lot of that. And then we had Cone's. Cone's was a grocery store, and that was a choice. And we used to go once a month to West Palm. That's where my parents shopped. So now you look around. I actually won the grand opening contest when they opened Winn-Dixie, which was probably, 40 some odd years ago. So now you don't think anything about having two Publixes in Hobe Sound, a Winn-Dixie, where we used to have, those small opportunities. We used to sell, my sister and I used to sell, we call it Florida holly. It's that Brazilian pepper. I think we're responsible for more Brazilian pepper trees on Jupiter Island than anybody else, because we used to sell these little stalks for 25 cents each. And I guess the people thought we were paupers or something, and they used to give us 20 and take these little Florida hollies home. And we didn't know they were like bad. We just thought it was a good way to make 25 cents, I remember going to school here. I remember being picked up in a bus when I went to school. When my sister went to school, my father brought her to this school. And I remember one time he swirled around, he dropped her off here and circled around, and I fell out of the car. Nancy got out of the car. I fell out of the car, and I scraped my knee. And my father, who had degrees from Columbia, if you will, in the medical field, painted a little rabbit of iodine on my knee. So that's an early memory, not a good one, but an early memory. So, and my sister went to school here, played piano recitals here. I don't remember her that much. She's 5 years older than I am. So at that day and age, 5 years was significant because it was a whole generation of school, if you will. And my sister Sally and I are close together in age, and we went to school here, and there were about 25 of us in the 5 grades, 1 through 5. I seem to remember something, other people have remembered that the older children were on this side and the younger children were on that side. I seem to remember it differently. We had blackboards, we had it seemed to me a lot of penmanship, and all of us probably who were in the early grades probably write a lot the same. My sisters and I both all write about the same because we spent a lot of time learning how to write. I'm not sure they do that today, but that's what we did. I remember we had a story time. One of my favorite books was Rufus the Red-Tailed Hawk, and we used to read Lassie Come Home about twice a year. So when you went to the same school, you heard the same books over and over. I went to 1st grade, and there were 2 of us in 2nd grade, and they figured it was more convenient and expedient to skip the 2 of us. So we went from 1st grade to 3rd grade. And so I always say I spent my first 5 years here, but in reality I spent my first 4 years here. I tell my children it's because I was bright that I skipped a grade, but the fact is they would have skipped any 2 kids just to tighten up the classroom a little bit. There were 2 teachers. This building that we're sitting in is the last remaining 2-room schoolhouse in Martin County. And it played a significant role in my upbringing. We had spelling bees here. We did most of our interactions, because we didn't live in town. We lived on the island. Most of our interactions either were involved in school activities or at the beach. We used to walk to the beach and spend a lot of time there, and a lot of the local kids did that too. As far as the school went, some of the games we played, we used to have a woodshed over here. We called it a woodshed, maybe it was coal, but we used to play Antony over the woodshed, and we'd throw a ball over the woodshed, and then we'd run around and try to catch each other or something. It was some kind of weird game that you'd only play in a schoolhouse this size. And we used to play hopscotch and jacks, and we used to play baseball on the mound out here. The kids used to play baseball. I remember, I'm not sure everybody does, maybe it's my own memory, but we used to play Queen of the Horses in the woods over here, and there was one woman who really walked well, and she was always queen, And I remember I was the mat or something, I don't know. I gave them the hay or something, I don't remember that. But that was a kind of a cool thing, was Queen of the Horses. So that was an activity. We made our own fun, I would say. And we didn't have, later on, we had a swing and a monkey bars. And one of our little fellas flew out of the swing and broke his arm, I remember that. But I think when I started, it was mostly improvised. My mother actually taught there was a tutorial school there, and my mother taught at that school for about 15 years. So she had some of the kids whose families are still on the island. They remember my mother. The number of people here, it's obviously the population. It's sort of crowded everything out. It's different from what we knew. I think it's indicative that if you ask maybe 10 people where Hobe Sound is, they won't know. Because we used to think of Hobe Sound as this little area right here, the school, the church, the civic center, diamonds, cones, chambers. That was Hobe Sound. We had the Marr family in Hobe Sound, and their father, I can remember, used to come and deliver our milk, and he used to come and put it in the refrigerator. The houses were always unlocked. There was virtually no crime. There's a socio-political issue too, though, that we sort of didn't address as we were growing up or being raised here, and that was segregation. We grew up certainly with segregation. We had totally segregated schools, and that, of course, has changed. That's been a big change. It's been a very positive change, but it has been a big change. And I always talk about the number of children, for example, who went to this school. And I always have to qualify, I feel I should qualify it because it was the white children who went to this school. This school was one time known as Hobe Sound White School. So that's been a significant change here, and rightfully so. The high school was also segregated when we went there. I graduated in the class of '62. I think it integrated. I think it was in the next 4, 5, or 6 years when I went to Gainesville, University of Florida. They were just beginning to integrate Florida. I think what we're trying to do here is to try to bring back, via pictures or these kinds of remembrance and stuff, what Hobe Sound was. How I think of when I go down A1A from Bridge Road down, near to where the Marrs lived and stuff. It was just, it was wide open. There were no medians. There was nothing. We just used to ride our bicycles over and get the mail every day and stuff. So those kinds of things are different. But it's still a nice town. I get a kick out of people saying how small it is, and I want to say, you don't know small. But good place, and good memories, and really, really good, decent people.